Hello, family members. I hope you're having a nice day today. Happy 420. The national holiday for the marijuana smokers out there. Unofficial, of course, because most things related to marijuana are unofficial or a little bit shady by design. That's the reason why we look at marijuana the way we do today, of course, is related to the fact that Nixon and other politicians through the 20th century decided to use it as a weapon against people they saw undesirable. People of color, the hippies, the war protesters, a lot of them used marijuana, and so they could use marijuana as a justification to harass these people, to imprison them. And they still do that to this day, of course. The problem with law enforcement in this country is laws are very rarely enforced. And most of the time when crimes happen, they are not solved and people don't pay a price for them. It's only people who are in the wrong place at the wrong time and police and prosecutors decide to enforce the law in that particular instance. And we have to look at the ways that laws are enforced, which laws do get enforced. They don't enforce, say, wage theft. When wage theft happens on a corporate level, almost nobody ever goes to prison for that. But if an employee embezzles from a company, they might, because the company is going to want to make an example of them, right? Somebody powerful has to decide that you're the person who is going to be prosecuted in order for a crime to be prosecuted. And so that's leaving us in this very weird system where federally it is illegal to smoke marijuana, but from state to state it varies wildly. You get places like California where they have recreational available, and you start seeing ads for Jay and Silent Bob weed delivery service and stuff like that. I mean, that's literally an ad that I just saw. We have all of these large corporations and brands that are involved in selling legal weed in certain states. There's too much money. There's too many interests in it for it to stop now. It's probably at some point going to have to be adjudicated at the federal level. The fact that we have this huge industry growing in our country in certain states that has a lot of power and a lot of money in it that are federally illegal. But that's not the only industry that has that problem right now. We see that with gambling too. We have these gambling apps like Polymarket and Kalshi. They try to call themselves something other than gambling apps, but that's what they are. And gambling is not legal in most states. And yet they just do it anyway. And it seems like they're probably going to get away with it because they have enough money and enough people in high enough places. They're going to push back on any sort of state level attempt to challenge this de facto overturn on gambling bans. Wild. But I wonder how much the federal government's reticence to deal with its marijuana problem and how it's allowed that market to flourish despite never actually resolving the issue of legality on a federal level. I wonder how much of that emboldened people like Crypto Bros and the people who create gambling apps and FanDuel and sports betting and all of that. When they see something like federally illegal marijuana suddenly become available first as medical marijuana in many places and not really get a federal pushback on that. And then once it starts rolling out medically, then you start seeing people doing recreational, states doing recreational. And once that change rolls out, it's just really hard to roll back. Once the public sees that access to this substance hasn't made a huge difference in their community one way or the other than it's a very profitable way to collect tax money for communities and create jobs for communities. And it's hard to imagine that the momentum in changing public perception is going to change with all of these interests in it. And it really infuriates me because I am a medical marijuana user. I use it to manage a lot of my symptoms. There are people in other states that couldn't do that at all. If I didn't have the money and the access to go to the doctor and get my medical marijuana card, which isn't easy, it requires rolling renewal on like a 7-month basis. And you have to go see the doctor every like 6 months. So it doesn't, it's not like you do all the things all at once. You have to do them at different times. It's staggered. You have to keep paying attention to it. It's really very tightly gatekept. And then, of course, you have to afford the product. Once you get to the point where you've paid all the things that you have to pay to be able to buy the product in the first place. That just isn't available to a lot of people. I'm fortunate that it is available to me. But it infuriates me that there are other people in this state who need this for medical reasons that probably cannot access it without going through a black market. And of course, there's all sorts of bad side effects of having black markets. So why do we do that? Why don't we just make it available to everyone? Remove those barriers. Well, because a lot of people don't want us to have it at all. And those people have power too. And they may not be able to stop the momentum, but they can drag their feet and they can make us very miserable in the meantime. And that's what happened in Florida. The people of Florida voted and made it clear that we wanted patients like me to have access to medical marijuana. And then our state government comes in behind and tries to find every way it can to undermine that access. They put all of these different conditions on it, and they make it very hard. In West Virginia, my father has a medical marijuana card in West Virginia. You can buy 6 ounces of flower per month. In Florida, it's like 2.5, and it's a 35-day rolling thing, and you can't ever have more than that certain amount at a time. And it's really complicated to the point that they had to basically build a website to tell you when and how much you could buy, because it's too complicated to figure out, tally on your own. We're talking about people who are disabled or sick, and they need medical help. And in order to get one of their medicines, they have to go through all of these ridiculous hoops. Even though the people of my state said I should have access to this, my state government has done everything they could to make it almost impossible for me to get the amount of medicine I need to be able to have any quality of life. And that's on purpose. And the other thing that really infuriates me is my state's governor, Mr. Ron DeSantis, took money from the opioid settlement, where the people who manufactured opioids had to give money to the states to offset the cost of this horrible opioid crisis that they created. And Ron DeSantis used that money to campaign against recreational marijuana. It was on our ballot. We had a ballot initiative in our last election. It got a majority support, but it didn't quite meet the threshold that it needed. because our governor went out of the way to use public funds that should have been used to help offset the brutal opioid crisis, instead of using that for rehab or treatment or research or anything related to opioids, he used it to try to suppress, to sway the will of the people in an election. That wasn't his money to do that with. That was our money. He stole it and then he used it to try to confuse people on the issue. And the issue just barely failed because of him and his wife, who absolutely despise marijuana for whatever reason. I don't know what their reasoning is, but it's not their job to tell the people of Florida how they feel about it. And yet, for some reason, they decided it was. Hopefully, the next time that we get this ballot initiative out there and we're actually able to vote on it, we'll be able to overcome the obstacles thrown in our way by the powers that be that want to ignore the will of the people. These people that want minority rule. It's very frustrating. Meanwhile, in West Virginia, my dad can get medical there, but it's incredibly expensive, and there's not a lot of selection because West Virginia, same thing, had to include this. The voters wanted to have medical marijuana, but they want to make it as onerous as possible. They do allow the corporations to make their money. I have to say, I have a cousin who works at a dispensary in West Virginia, and it's a very secure job. It's a good job that he has, and I am glad for that. But why couldn't there be more of jobs like that so that people like my dad wouldn't have such limited options? It's so interesting how Republicans absolutely hate overregulation until it's something like marijuana, right? When it's something that the people want, but they don't want us to want. Then they're all about, well, let's overregulate it. Let's make it hard and onerous for those businesses to get going. Not very pro-business, is it? There's always going to be debates about what marijuana actually does. We don't have the type of research that we should have on it, considering how long we've had access to the substance. But, the other problem is there's so many people who like the status quo that it's hard to believe studies when they come out aren't biased. They go in trying to prove that marijuana is bad for some reason so they can then point to that bad reason to continue their prohibition and their prohibition mindset. And yet they'll come out, and if the study doesn't prove what they want it to prove, are they going to publicize it? Probably not. I know they've attempted multiple times to link marijuana to lung cancer, and they just can't do it. And that's got to be frustrating to them. They want to be able to do that. It doesn't make sense that you would smoke and it wouldn't affect your lungs in some way, right? But they can't prove what they want to prove, and so the science is just considered unsettled. It's a problem. It's absolutely a problem that a drug that does help people. There are people who have seizure disorder that it completely changes their life to have this. There's cancer patients like my aunt, one of the most straight-laced people I've ever known. Very classical conservative with a small c kind of conservative. And she would never do drugs, but she does use medical marijuana because it helps manage her pain. She doesn't want to use opioids or other types of pain medicines that have awful side effects, But there are places where my aunt, if she lived in a certain state, she wouldn't be able to get that medical, she wouldn't be able to get that relief. You know, she's in her 80s and she's got cancer and something else going on. I can't remember what it is right now. But, I mean, she's got multiple health issues and she's found something that makes her life a little bearable, a little more bearable. She should have access to that. All medical patients should have access to that. But I don't know what's going to happen with it. It's very strange that we haven't had something federally to settle the matter. You know, just overturn the prohibition federally and let it go back to the states. That's what Republicans are supposed to want, right? But then again, if states are keeping people from having access to something that would improve their quality of life, why is that allowed? I genuinely think that when it comes to matters of health, governments need to stay out of it. Now, that's a lot of the problem with, say, abortion restrictions. You know, abortion is just a medical procedure. It can be done for any number of reasons, not even just because a person doesn't want to have a baby. It could be because there's something wrong, physically wrong with the baby or the person carrying that baby. And that medical procedure may be necessary just to preserve life. And yet we have these politicians who want to insert themselves into a doctor's room and not get between a doctor and their patient. When a doctor wants to say, this is what a patient needs, I don't feel like a politician should be able to override that. But that's the world we live in. We have all of these weird regulations so that the right people can suppress the right things and the wrong people can be punished. And I think that Americans are smarter than that. I think that they can see that it's silly and doesn't benefit the community to arrest people for having, you know, small amounts of marijuana. And when we don't allow people to purchase marijuana legally, then we create black markets. And we can just completely get rid of that black market. All of that potential crime just gone by giving people avenues to buy things legally. I don't know why this isn't more of an issue. A good deal of Americans smoke or know someone that smokes, and they see it's not that big of a deal. I know people who don't smoke and they're like, it's not for me, but I don't see any problem with other people using it. I mean, I think most people, when they are educated about anything, find it a lot less mystifying. And when I was a kid, I had to go to DARE and I had to be lied to about drugs. And it was absolutely useless to me because they told you truths and lies. How are you supposed to parse them? And so you reject everything as a lie. And then you have to find things out through whisper networks. That's what it was like back when I was growing up in the 90s and in the early 2000s. But now people see medical marijuana users online and see there are all kinds of people from, you know, little kids to grandmas, and they're not like, you know, those dreadlock stoner hippie people that you would see in some sort of like comedy from the 80s or 90s or something. They're not some stereotype, they're just people. They see people who are in states where recreational is available, just treat it like the same way they treat beer, like craft beer or something like that. And they don't see any major changes in their community because of that. And so it gets harder and harder to keep pushing this narrative that there needs to be this total ban, this total prohibition. Even if something isn't for you, doesn't mean that nobody should have access to it, right? I honestly don't know how this issue will resolve. It seems to me like more and more states are just going to kind of do their own thing. And maybe in 10 or 20 years, the federal government will finally catch up. Who knows? I mean, right now, I don't think it's a huge priority for them. I think they like things the way they are because they can still harass the wrong people using these laws if they want to. They just can selectively enforce them as long as they're there. And so that's why I think maybe it's time for people to stop just worrying about their own state and start looking at the bigger picture. I absolutely support any referendum that we put on the ballot to get recreational available. I want the boundaries taken away in my state. But I also care about the other states. I also care about the people who were caught up in this anti-marijuana hysteria before states started making it legal. I want us to stop ignoring this issue. I want us to free people who are in jail right now for doing things that would have been legal if they had just waited a little while. I want to see us actually, as a nation, approach this issue and make it clear where we stand. You know, total availability, maybe not. But total prohibition is over. And pretending like it's still there, letting that law be on the books, is just dangerous. It just gives government power to selectively enforce it and harass whoever they want. And so that's why I think it's time for us to call for national decriminalization. It's time. It's past time for us to call for national decriminalization. I hope that you'll think about this and maybe decide to take some steps in your life to support that. You know, even small posts, writing to your congressmen or senators about it, or local politicians. If you live in a state that doesn't have medical or recreational yet, checking to see if there's any groups that are working on that and joining those groups. I hope that you will see this video as a call to action if you live in a place where marijuana is not available. Because I know too many people who it's helped them. It's a tragedy that people don't have access to this when they need it. When I was growing up, my dad taught profoundly mentally impaired children, and he occasionally would have children that had seizure disorders. And I remember this one little girl that he had who had to have like a pillow right here in front of her, and then this and that and the other thing, because she'd have seizures constantly. She didn't have the medical marijuana available to her. I wonder if her life would have been completely different if she had had that, because it is a really good drug for people with seizure disorders or people with nerve pain. Like me, like my dad. It really is so helpful. There's not a whole lot of drugs that really help with nerve pain. The criminalization of marijuana was a political decision that had medical consequences. And I think we are far past the time where it's time to undo that. So, family members, I hope you enjoy your 420 if you celebrate in whatever manner you may do so. Of course, responsibly. Uh, um, while you can't really overdose on marijuana, you can overdo it. And so, please don't. Be careful of operating heavy machinery, things like that. But otherwise, I'm not here to judge. I don't know why someone might want to smoke, but I can say for myself, I wouldn't function without it. It's how I'm able to eat and be able to take the rest of my meds, so it's pretty important to me. And I hope other people will advocate for people like me to have the access that we deserve, and for people who have been imprisoned and punished for marijuana-related crimes to get the freedom and the justice they deserve. All right, family members, I will say a fond adieu to you. I hope you have a great day, and talk to you later. Bye.